This is a WMUR Commitment 2024 special in partnership with the New Hampshire Institute of Politics. Conversation with the candidate. And now, former Congressman Will Hurd.
Hello and welcome to our Conversation with the Candidate series. I'm Adam Sexton and our guest is former Texas Congressman Will Hurd. We'll be getting to know the Republican and where he stands on some key issues. At the start of our show, I'll be asking the candidate some questions. And then after a break, we'll have our studio audience ask their questions in a town hall format. But before we begin with that, let's take a quick look at the candidate's biography. Will Hurd served as a U.S. Congressman from the 23rd District of Texas for 3 terms from 2015 to 2021. Before his time in Washington, Hurd worked in cybersecurity as a partner at the Crumpton Group and helped build the Fusion X company. Prior to his cybersecurity work, he was an undercover officer in the CIA for nearly a decade, with postings primarily in the Middle East and East Asia. Hurd is now a trustee of the German Marshall Fund, a board member of OpenAI, and a managing director at Allen & Company. He's the author of American Reboot, an idealist's guide to getting big things done. In announcing his candidacy, Hurd has cited the need for American leadership to look to the issues of the future, like the rise of China and artificial intelligence. A native of San Antonio, he earned a computer science degree from Texas A&M University. He's married to his wife, Lindley, who serves as a legislative counsel in Texas. All right, Congressman Will Hurd, thanks so much for joining us for Conversation with the Candidate.
Thanks for having me on.
So you have served this country in some far-flung locations across the globe, protecting American lives and interests. But there are a growing number of Americans who are skeptical of U.S. involvement and putting people like you in harm's way all the way around the globe. Why do you think that is, and what should the next president do about it?
Well, I think why is that is real simple. People want to know and want to understand, what is that? How does that impact me? How does that impact me at home? Especially when we have a lot of issues at home, whether it's border security or fentanyl coming in through our borders or rising healthcare costs, things like that. So that's the question. And what the president needs to do, the next president, what I plan on doing when I'm in office, is not make the mistakes that the last 3 or 4 presidents have made. You have to convince the American people why this matters. Let's take a place like Ukraine. The United States of America, after World War II, built an international order that benefits us. It allows us to have a trading partner where together we were able to have half of global GDP. That benefited the United States of America, and that made Americans enjoy a quality of life that's the envy of the world. So if we don't defend that international order, it hurts us. And when it comes to Ukraine specifically, nobody wants that to be a forever war. So we should be helping the Ukrainians have all the equipment and military that they need in order to win the war immediately, not give them equipment and support piecemeal. We should be working with our allies in order to do that so that we can bring this to a conclusion. And that's why these things matter. And guess what? The world is only getting increasingly complicated. It's getting increasingly dangerous. We're going to have to deal with the Chinese government and their activities in East Asia. So we have to get this right. And when we don't defend these things that have benefited us, it's going to hurt us long term.
Let's talk about Chinese spying in America. How deeply ingrained is their intelligence apparatus in our online world and on our smartphones? It's
increasing and getting worse. Last year, there's a report that was done that the number of zero-day attacks, a zero-day is a cybersecurity attack that nobody knows of. Like it is the most sophisticated way to attack your computer software. There was a significant increase of those kinds of attacks done that has been attributed to the Chinese government. Oh, and guess where those attacks were directed? To the defense industrial base of the United States. So that is, eroding our military secrets, eroding our intelligence secrets, and we have to be working with our allies to provide consequences to the Chinese government for doing these kinds of attacks. Now, it's just not the Chinese government that we have to worry about. The Russians are very equipped and capable of doing these kinds of attacks. The Iranians are very equipped at doing these kinds of attacks, and so are the North Koreans. So making sure that we're defending our digital infrastructure. And what is frustrating is there are still places where the vulnerability, the problem software code that a bad guy takes advantage of, we know that that's a problem, there should be a fix, and oftentimes in places in the federal government, those things aren't patched, meaning fixed. And so 80% of the things that impact us could be prevented. And so it's not just intelligence, but it's also cybercrime. By 2025, predictions are that around the world, over $10 trillion is going to get stolen from cybercrime. That's a crazy number. And so we need to be making sure that we're defending our digital infrastructure at a time when our online lives and digital lives are getting even more interconnected.
Yeah, and here we are as regular people, but there's artificial intelligence now coming into play as well. You served on the board of OpenAI, and I'm interested for your perspective here because there are a wide range of hot takes, if you will, on this from the experts. Some say this could hasten the end of human civilization. Others think it's going to be great. But what about that idea that the AI could end all of our lives? Do you think that's too extremist, and what does the next president need to do?
So AI is equivalent to the power of nuclear fission. Nuclear fission controlled gives you nuclear energy, clean, limitless power. Nuclear fission uncontrolled gives you nuclear weapons, weapons of the utmost destruction. So AI is equivalent. And so yes, there should be some concerns. 65% of Americans are afraid that a robot's going to take their job. There have been a number of reports that say 85 million jobs around the world can get impacted by AI. AI is a tool that's used in the wrong hands of bad guys, can be used to try to influence communities and people. And can AI, self-perpetuate, or to get so smart that it's able to not follow the intentions of its human programmers? All those things could happen, but they don't have to. AI can actually be used to improve job opportunities and improve the kinds of quality, the quality of jobs, not lead to unemployment. AI can help us become more secure. AI could lead to a reduction in income inequality. Imagine every kid, every learner has an AI tutor in their pocket, right? So this is where the opportunity is. And what does the next president need to do? They need to first, we need someone that understands these technologies, right? And then we need to make sure that we're doing some basic things like make AI follow the law. It seems so simple and so basic, but that's not the world we're living in today. If everything we know about social media, and how in some cases social media has led to young girls cutting themselves, right? Knowing what we know now, will we do things differently? We can have the opportunity of foresight if we recognize hindsight. And that's where we need to make sure that AI follows the law. I also want the government, by the end of 2025, use AI to improve the efficiency of government. Why is there a lack of trust? Your first question was about this lack of trust issue. Why not use these tools to improve the constituent-facing services? Right? It shouldn't take months to get an appointment at the VA. It should take minutes. It shouldn't take months to get your passport renewed. It should take minutes. And AI is a tool that can improve the efficiency of the government.
All right, Congressman Hurd, as I like to say, this was the easy part, but those town hall questions from New Hampshire voters await. Coming up after the break, we'll bring our studio audience into this conversation. Stay with us.